It was a cold morning in Paris, one of those days when the sky feels gray from the moment you wake up, and the wind slices across your face like a razor. The small secondary school in the Montreuil suburb, where N'Golo Kanté's younger sister studied, was already filling with teenage voices and hurried footsteps. At 12 years old, Aissata was a shy girl, with a gentle gaze, a quiet smile, and a notebook always clutched to her chest like a shield. Black, with her hair carefully braided by their mother every Sunday night, she was a dedicated student. But she couldn't escape the weight of being different in a school where prejudice still whispered through the hallways. That morning, she arrived 10 minutes before the bell rang, as usual. She sat on the concrete bench near the entrance, trying to go unnoticed. But the three boys who picked on her every day, Louis, Baptiste, and Clément, already had their eyes on her. They were older, loud, and felt invincible in their expensive sneakers, and with the silent approval of their peers. "Hey, Aissata, where did you get that coat? The garbage?" Louis mocked, laughing loudly, attracting the attention of other students. She tried to ignore them, clutching her notebook tighter to her chest, but that only encouraged them. Baptiste stepped closer with a cynical grin. "Heard your brother's a janitor. Makes sense. You look like someone who scrubs toilets after school." Clément, the most aggressive of the three, came up behind her and smacked her notebook, sending it flying to the ground. Pages scattered. Aissata, her eyes welling up, quickly crouched to gather them, trying to hide the tears that had begun to fall. She wasn't crying just because of the bullying. She cried because of the loneliness, because of the shame of not being able to defend herself, because every day felt just like this one. The bell rang. The boys walked off laughing as if nothing had happened. No one helped. No one said anything. Or rather, everyone saw, but pretended not to. In class, the teacher called her name for attendance, but her voice trembled as she answered, "Present." Her eyes were red, and her heart was heavy. She spent the day in silence. She didn't answer the teacher's questions. She didn't eat lunch. During PE, she faked a stomachache to sit out. But that Friday, something would be different. It was her older brother's turn to pick her up from school. And he wasn't just any older brother. N'Golo Kanté had arrived in Paris 2 days earlier, after a series of international commitments. Whenever he could, even with his hectic schedule, he made a point of seeing his sister. They had a special bond. He helped Aissata with her math homework, and he used to read her bedtime stories when their parents were busy. To her, N'Golo wasn't a celebrity. He was her safe place. That afternoon, Aissata felt nervous just thinking about him coming. She wanted to tell him what had been happening, but at the same time she felt ashamed and scared of disappointing him. Outside, the same three bullies were hanging around near the school gate. They were laughing loudly, throwing rocks at a tree, and looking around for someone else to mock. Aissata stepped out slowly, staring at the ground. She was bracing for another mean comment when she heard one of the boys shout, "Wait, is that him?" Louis's eyes widened as he pointed. "That's Kanté! Kanté's coming this way!" N'Golo walked in his usual humble way, wearing a gray hoodie, jeans, and worn-out sneakers. Despite his fame, he never changed. He had a smile on his face, and his eyes lit up as he saw his sister. The boys' excitement was obvious. They all ran toward him as if they'd been best friends forever. "Mr. Kanté, can I take a photo with you?" Clément said, grinning wide. "I'm such a big fan," Baptiste added, almost tripping over himself in his rush. Aissata stood still, watching from a distance. Her backpack felt heavier than ever. Her eyes welled up again. She knew exactly what was behind those fake smiles. Kanté didn't answer right away. First, he walked over to his sister. He knelt down, opened his arms, and gave her a long, tight hug. She broke down instantly, silently, the way she always did. He felt her trembling, her uneven breathing. He knew in that moment that something was wrong. He looked into her eyes. "Aissata, did something happen?" he asked, gently but firmly. She simply nodded, unable to speak. Kanté stood up. Slowly. His expression had changed. There was still kindness, but now there was something else. Dignity. Resolve. and deep sadness. He turned to the three boys who were still holding their phones, waiting for a photo. The silence that followed was the beginning of something none of them would forget. Kanté took a step forward. His face, once serene, now carried the gravity of someone who bore far more than fame or trophies. He carried history. He carried memory. He carried scars. And standing before those three boys eager for a selfie, he decided he wouldn't let this moment pass unnoticed. "Do you know my sister?" he asked, his voice low, unhurried, but with a firmness that wiped the smiles off their faces. The three looked at each other. Aissata was behind him, still wiping away her tears. Yeah," Louis replied hesitantly. "Did you know she cries every day when she leaves school?" The silence became heavy, solid like stone. Clément lowered his gaze. Baptiste stepped back slightly. "You think I'm special? That I'm a hero?" Kanté continued, now looking each of them in the eyes. "You think just because I'm on TV on the field I deserve respect?" Yes, Mr. Kanté. We just wanted a photo," Clément stammered, trying to smile again, but the attempt died halfway. "Then why doesn't my sister, who shares my blood, deserve respect?" The question hung in the air like a punch. The school around them seemed to slow down. Some students started to gather nearby, sensing something important was happening. Others watched from a distance. But Kanté wasn't speaking to the crowd. He was speaking to those three, and to Aissata. When I was her age, I was the invisible boy too. The black boy. The immigrant son who didn't have brand-name clothes, who didn't get the jokes, who ate differently, spoke differently. He took a deep breath and was humiliated for it. Another silence. But this one felt different. This was a silence filled with shame. "But I survived. And do you know why?" The boys didn't answer. They were frozen. "Because I had something you haven't learned yet. Dignity. And dignity, boys, can't be bought. Not with branded sneakers, not with Instagram likes, not with selfies with celebrities." Aissata now looked at her brother with teary eyes. But it wasn't pain anymore. It was something else. The feeling of finally being seen. It was as if every word he said was stitching together the broken pieces inside her. "You bullied my sister because she's black. Because she's different. Because she's quiet. You feel strong when you put down someone weaker. But I'll tell you a secret," he said, lowering his voice like he was sharing something intimate. "That's not strength. That's cowardice." Baptiste had tears in his eyes now. Louis stared at the ground. Clément, once the boldest, was visibly trembling. True strength is in protecting, not hurting. In lifting others up, not pushing them down. In including, not excluding. Ngolo moved closer to Aissata and gently held her hand. She gripped his tightly. "She's my sister. But she could have been yours too. And you chose to hurt her." He turned back to the boys. "I didn't come here to shame you. I came to remind you. Because one day you'll grow up. And you'll remember this moment. Maybe you'll be fathers, or teachers, or judges. And you'll have the power to do what you did here, or something better, something right." He looked each one in the eye again. "And when that day comes, I hope you choose the right path, because life gives back everything we put into it." He paused. Then, for the first time, his tone softened. "Now go, but remember this. And if someday you want a photo with me, ask my sister first if she agrees." The three boys slowly nodded. They turned away in silence, eyes wet, and walked off. They didn't run. They didn't joke. They said nothing more. The small crowd that had gathered stayed still. No one clapped. No one pulled out a phone. But everyone knew they had witnessed something rare. Something transformative. Kanté then turned to Aissata. "Shall we go?" She nodded. But before leaving, she took a step forward. She looked at the school, at the faces, at the places where she had felt so small for so long. And she took a deep breath. It was the beginning of something new. The walk to the car was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. No longer the silence of hidden pain, of swallowed shame, of constant fear. It was the quiet of healing, of being seen, of being protected. Aisata walked beside her brother as if, for the first time in a long while, she truly existed. Whole, visible, validated. Ngolo opened the car door for her like he always did. He buckled her seatbelt gently, brushed a hand softly across her face, and smiled. Today, you were braver than any player in a World Cup final. She smiled back, her eyes still watery, but now with something more. Light. The pain hadn't vanished, but for the first time, it had room to breathe. She wasn't alone anymore. I wish I had said something, she whispered, gazing out the window. And you will, he said, in your own time, in your own way. Courage doesn't always live in loud voices. Sometimes it lives in the quiet that refuses to break. They drove through the familiar streets of Montreuil, the neighborhood where Kanté's own childhood still echoed. He looked out at the city like someone watching an old film filled with bitter and sweet memories. He knew what had happened at that school wasn't an isolated incident. It was a reflection of countless stories like his, like hers, like those of thousands of black children, immigrant children, different children, who every day fight just to exist. Did you know, he began, glancing at her, that when I was your age, a boy once spat on my lunch at school? She turned to him, shocked. Really? Really? And I didn't do anything. I just walked away. Ate at home, quietly, just like you. Aisata stared at him for a moment. What happened to that boy? I don't know, I never saw him again. But I remember the taste of that shame, and the urge to disappear. But that moment taught me something I've carried my whole life. She leaned in, listening. The world will try to make you believe you're worth less, but the only person who can believe that is you. The sentence sank deep into her chest, quiet, but powerful. And what if I do believe it? She asked softly. Kanté smiled, took her hand, and squeezed it gently. Then I'll be here to remind you who you are. Every single day, if I have to. They reached home soon after. Their mother, Fatou, was in the kitchen, cooking something warm and familiar. The scent of rice, chicken, and vegetables drifted through the house, flavors of comfort, of memory. When she saw them enter, she noticed the puffiness around her daughter's eyes. Aisata? What happened? Before the girl could respond, Kanté placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. Today was a big day, Mama. She faced something hard, and she won. Fatou looked at her daughter with tenderness. Aisata rushed into her arms and hugged her tightly. There was no need to explain. Mothers just know. That evening they all sat down for dinner together, as always. But something had changed. A weight had lifted. A cloud had cleared. Later, in her room, Aisata opened her notebook, the same one that had been knocked to the ground that morning. She flipped to the last page and began to write. Today, Ngolo saved me. But more than that, he showed me I can save myself too. That my voice matters. That my skin is beautiful. That being different isn't a flaw. It's armor. She closed the notebook carefully, set it aside, and looked out the window. The sky was still gray, but she knew the sun was behind the clouds. It always had been. The next day, she arrived at school even earlier. She sat on the same concrete bench. But this time, she sat up straight. Her shoulders didn't fold in on themselves. She wasn't trying to disappear. The same 3 boys walked past her. They didn't mock her. They didn't laugh. They didn't say anything. Until Clément stopped, turned around, looked at her. I'm sorry, he muttered. His voice was low, almost ashamed. But it was enough. Aisata didn't answer. She didn't need to. She stood up, walked to class, and for the first time in a long while, she felt whole. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace. Honking horns, hurried footsteps, ticking clocks. But inside her, something had shifted forever. And N'Golo Kanté, the man the world cheered for in stadiums, knew that his greatest victory wasn't a trophy or a goal. It was right here, in a schoolyard, in his sister's heart, in the moment she chose not to shrink anymore, even if she still hadn't spoken a word. Because sometimes, standing tall is the loudest voice of all.